Welcome back, Hard Rockers. We've already made it through several of the Motley Crue studio albums. Now we're up to number 2 on my list of the Crue albums, Shout at the Devil. And God, man, I'm all constipated and I've already thought a million times, is this really how I feel? Which is exactly what I think every time I try to decide which of these albums is really, truly my favorite, even though I come to the same exact conclusion every single time. And I'm going to talk more about why in the next video than I am in this one. But there's a reason for that. To tell you why one album gets number 1, first, I have to explain why number 2 is as high on my list as it is. Okay, so what I've decided to do is start out with what else came out in 1983. And then finally, now that was the 18th, finally, on September 26th, we get Shout at the Devil. The album was released on Elektra Records. It was produced by Tom Werman, the first of 3 consecutive Motley albums that would be produced by Werman, and it was engineered by Jeff Workman. Shout at the Devil sold 200,000 copies in its first 2 weeks. The Pentagram, this is my original vinyl, which has a little red tape I had to put on it. It's definitely seen some use over the years. Anyway, the Pentagram was something Nikki Sixx brought with him from the band Sister, a very theatrical band he had been a member of, along with future Wasp vocalist and bassist and then guitarist Blackie Lawless in the late 70s prior to the formation of Motley Crue. According to Blackie Lawless, Nikki Sixx asked Lawless for permission to use some of Sister's occult-related imagery for Shout at the Devil, as at that point, Lawless was intent on moving in a different direction. And according to Blackie, quote, I said, take whatever you want, because at that point, I realized that with an image like that, you end up painting yourself into a corner and you can't get out, end quote. Just before they began recording the album, Motley Crue was famously kicked off their support spot on Kiss's Creatures of the Night tour. The bands played only 5 shows together before Gene Simmons demanded they be replaced, citing bad behavior. Sounds like Gene, right? During recording, bassist Nikki Sixx was involved in a serious car crash after drunkenly stealing a friend's Porsche in Los Angeles. At around the same time, actress and friend of Sixx's, Demi Moore, told Sixx he needed Alcoholics Anonymous, though Sixx dismissed her concerns. Nicky badly injured his shoulder in the crash, was prescribed Percocet and the powerful opioid oxycodone, which was commonly prescribed to treat severe short-term pain. Six's use of Percocet transitioned directly into a crippling addiction to heroin, which would cost him about $3,500 a day, according to these sources, and almost claim his life later in the decade. As the band toured with Ozzy Osbourne in support of Shout at the Devil, they discussed replacing guitarist Mick Mars, reportedly. Mars was several years older than the other members of the band, and his bandmates were eager to add a more technically proficient guitarist in the vein of Yngwie Malmsteen or somebody like that. Bob Daisley, Osbourne's bassist at the time, was reportedly present during the tour bus discussion and told the band, quote, "Do not try to fix something that isn't broken," when asked for his opinion. Daisley has said that the band was serious at that time about replacing the guitarist, though thankfully they did not. As the tour continued, the band was invited to take part in the 1984 Monsters of Rock Festival, supporting headliners Van Halen and AC/DC. Guitarist Eddie Van Halen was bitten by Vince Neil during a dinner, with drummer Tommy Lee also biting Malcolm Young at some point. Van Halen and Young were both reportedly furious over this behavior. Tommy Lee also became involved in a fistfight with David Lee Roth, which saw Motley Crue expelled from their hotel. AC/DC and Van Halen both subsequently demanded Motley Crue be removed from the bill, but the band's popularity at that time made such a move difficult. The promoter came up with an unusual solution. Motley Crue would enter their trailer immediately upon arrival at the concert venue, and a large crane would then lift the trailer several meters off the ground to prevent the band members from leaving and causing trouble before their performance. They would also be required to leave the concert venue immediately following their performance. Quote, "You apologized every day," end quote, said manager Doc McGee of Motley Crue's behavior during this period, which eventually resulted in him having to pay a $15,000 deposit before any hotel would allow the band to stay. McGee also established a rule in which each band member would submit to him a list of everything they had destroyed in a hotel before he would allow them to check out. Just a few samples of what the behavior was like. Okay, so let's talk about some review scores that Shout at the Devil received from professional reviewers. Canadian journalist Martin Popoff, who considered, if you remember, Dr. Feelgood a really dumb band trying really hard, considered Shout at the Devil inferior to Motley's debut album, Too Fast for Love, but found its music extremely addictive, if unoriginal, calling it, quote, punk rocking lobotomy metal, end quote. Adrian Begrand of Pop Matters called the album a sleazy and menacing, timeless LA metal classic. In his opinion, the album contained the band's best singles and remains to this day Motley Crue's finest hour. Ultimate Classic Rock's Eduardo Rivadavia gave much praise to the album, calling it the ultimate LA glam metal album, and called the band the first heavy metal band to truly cross over from the male to female audience, which automatically doubled the band's fan base building prospects, end quote. Another quote about the album from Satchel of Steel Panther, quote, without this album, a lot of the great hair metal bands wouldn't have come about. Theater of Pain was more of their glam look, but Shout at the Devil was such a great record. It was fucking sick. They set the bar. People looked at that and said, fuck yeah, we gotta dress up cool, man. Shout at the Devil peaked at number 17 on the Billboard 200. The singles Looks That Kill and Too Young to Fall in Love peaked at number 54 and number 90, respectively, on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1984, while the title track and first single, Shout at the Devil, peaked at number 30 on the mainstream rock chart. And of the album's sales and certification, Nikki Sixx said in 2000, when a band like us put out Shout at the Devil and the label does zero marketing, zero publicity, and takes zero trade advertisements, and you sell 5 million records, then everybody starts patting themselves on the back. But it's Motley Crue that did that, not Elektra Records. Okay, so how do I feel about Shout at the Devil? For anyone who might be too young to have experienced the birth of the Motley Crue era firsthand with Shout at the Devil, I have to tell you, Nicky is exactly right when he says that. Everything this band got in the 80s and after, they earned themselves. My buying this album and getting it out every day had nothing to do with any record company or advertisement or influencing. It was all 1,000% because of who the band was and what the band stood for. When I talk about this album, I have to talk a little bit about where I was in my life first, to give some context for my perspective. As many of you have already heard me mention several times, I was a major Kiss fan from the age of 6. Shout came out in September of '83, and by then I had already been introduced to albums like I would have been 13 years old in September of '83, the first time I heard Shout at the Devil. I still remember that exact moment pretty clearly, too. A couple of friends, Eric and Sean, and I were having a sleepover that night, probably at Eric's house, though I don't really remember for sure. We spent a fair amount of time together in those days, being the fellow developing headbangers we were, And they were getting me into other bands I hadn't really heard yet, like Aerosmith, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, and others. And I was absolutely going out of my mind with all the fantastic heavy music I was discovering and getting totally carried away with. By that point, I was also already beating the hell out of my first drum kit in my upstairs bedroom. How on earth did I convince my parents to let me have a drum set, you may ask? And you'd be right to ask, of course. They obviously had to be insane, right? Well, apparently, I was an absolute genius. Because when I joined the junior high band in the 6th grade, I'd always wanted to play drums since the first time I heard Peter Criss's drum solo on 100,000 Years from Kiss Alive. So obviously, I started on trumpet. Guess I must not have been really great at the trumpet, because after a few weeks of me practicing in my bedroom, Mom literally said to me, "Hey, I think it's great that you're learning to play the trumpet, and we will always support you playing an instrument. But wouldn't you like to play something else, like, I don't know, the drums?" And I swear it's true. She literally said to me, "If you'll quit the trumpet, we'll let you have a drum set in your bedroom and play it all you want." So after the half second it took me to say yes, my parents and grandparents pitched in together and bought me a $250 used drum set for my 12th birthday. To Mom and Dad's credit, I have to hand it to them. They never said a single word about how terrible I was on those drums at first, no matter how hard I beat those things. And I did. I beat the living hell out of those drums, and I was not doing it all in the right places, musically speaking. For those of you who may be contemplating the obvious question, yes, I had a cowbell. Yeah, so anyway, back to our story. I think it was a Friday after school, and whichever house we were staying at, the parents wanted to go to the next town over because it had a Walmart and our pathetic little 2,000 population town did not. So we all piled into the car, me and the guys in the back seat, with somebody's boombox. I'm pretty sure it was Eric's parents and Eric's parents' car and Eric's boombox, but that was like nearly 40 years ago. So, and we were listening to something. I don't remember what it was, probably Quiet Riot or Def Leppard or something. And then Eric turns to me and asks, "Have you heard Motley Crue yet?" I hadn't. In fact, I had no idea who or what he was talking about at that point. I somehow hadn't even heard of them. So he and Sean look at each other, both grin and nod. And then he pulls something out of the tape case that's behind us in the back compartment of whatever car this was, takes the tape out, and hands me the empty case to shout at the devil. Now, I've been looking at Kiss album covers my whole life at this point, and suddenly I'm looking at this cover and I'm, holy shit, what is this? And as I'm saying this, in the beginning starts to come out of these speakers. It keeps building that sound, that noise, that voice. Then it rises to its crescendo and just stops. Just as I start to lean in, wondering what the hell is going to follow this sudden silence, boom, shout of the devil explodes in my face. Boom, over it. That's it, done. But then the next track, and the next track, and the next track, and it just keeps going. And it just keeps blowing my face off. And it's all just so great and so mean and so loud and angry and aggressive and sonically violent and exactly what my 13-year-old self had apparently been looking for without even realizing it until that very moment. These songs were, at times, brutal, just brutal. And I do think that was a bit of the goal the band, and specifically Nikki Sixx, must have had, to just take over our boomboxes with blunt force trauma. For me, that's exactly what happened. This album killed everything else I had in my collection at that time. Just killed it. Quiet Riot, gone. Iron Maiden, Eagles, really? Kiss, meh. Def Leppard, whatever. I mean, I would go back to those albums from time to time just to avoid burnout. And I still love all of those to this day. But I can remember basically listening to that Shout cassette or vinyl every day from that first day I heard it, through that winter, the next spring and summer, and, well, until it was scorched into my brain like cotton candy strapped inside a fucking jet engine. It was glorious. Shout, Looks That Kill, Bastard, oh my God. And then, even when you get to the acoustic guitar ditty, it's an electric acoustic guitar ditty, and the whole thing is semi-distorted. And at the very end, you get the one vocal line, God bless the children of the beast. Even in the more mellow moments, this album was relentless. Next up, a Beatles cover. Oh, but the Beatles song that supposedly inspired Charles fucking Manson. Yikes. And what a great choice. It fits in as good as any cover they could have done at the time. Oh, but then we get to what was known in those days as side 2, children. And side 2 is just amazing too. Red Hot, Too Young to Fall in Love, Knock 'em Dead Kid, 10 Seconds to Love, and oh, the ballad, Danger. A dark, brooding, rage-filled trip through the bad attitude of a dude whose best friends have died somehow, and now he's telling us how pissed off he is about it and how prepared he is to do something about it. Whoa. And that's what I mean about this album being relentless. It just never lets up for a second. And that may be its single most important quality as an album. I don't know about anybody else, but in 1983, 1984, whenever I put this on, from the second In the Beginning began until the second Danger ended, and I flipped the tape over to start it all over again, I was lost in that world, in that sense of rebellion and rage I'd only begun to maybe feel a slight tinge of inside. And it was like these guys were telling me my future in some far more extreme version than the one I would personally experience, but my future nonetheless. No other album did that for me in 1983. None. Yet. At this point, this was easily the most important collection of songs I'd ever heard in my young life, bar none. Like I said, I was lost in this album. But at the same time, I was found. Finally, somebody, these guys, got me. The things I wanted to experience, the angst I was feeling, the "it's my life, don't tell me what to do, motherfucker" attitude I was only beginning to grow into at that age. So the cover, I mean, it's just gorgeous, right? I wish the label would have had the guts to put this on the cassette. But I mean, if you're not gonna do that, another pretty good choice. Wow. In fact, I kind of liked it that I had two different covers for the same album, because I bought this the same day I bought the cassette. That same day, my friends played it for me in the back seat of that car. We went to Walmart and we went straight to the electronics section, as we always did. And by God, I grabbed these. And I have never looked back. So how about the tracks? Okay. I'm not going to give In the Beginning a rating. It's not a song, but I'm going to talk about it. What can I say? Holy shit. What would this album be without In the Beginning? Still the single coolest intro to a song and an album that I have ever heard. You may disagree, and that's absolutely fine. You go right ahead. But for me, yeah. So, as ratings go, track 1, Shout at the Devil. Five stars. Get used to it. Possibly the heaviest thing I'd heard to this point in my life. Period. And yes, I'd heard Iron Maiden, but even Maiden was built on melody. This was anger. Plain and simple anger. What a beautiful sound that is. Why did more bands not seem to pick up on that right away? Track 3, Looks That Kill. 5 stars. There have been times I would have given it 4. Basically because I was a little burned out on it. But no, sorry, folks. This is a 5-star song on this album for sure. Looks That Kill was a moderate hit for the band and played a large role in exposing the band to a wider audience. According to Wikipedia, the music video produced for the song was shot over the course of an 18-hour day on the main soundstage at A&M Records in Los Angeles. Model Wendy Berry, who portrayed the warrior princess in the Looks That Kill music video, has said that her experience with the band was very positive, describing Motley Crue as all very nice, really down to earth and fun, in stark contrast with their growing reputation for depravity. While Berry acknowledges the music video generated a stir, she later said of it, quote, "I personally thought it was just a well-executed video as far as production, and the song was killer," end quote. A year later, Berry would appear again with Six and Lee in the music video for Rat's Back for More. So scramble now and watch that, and you'll realize that's the same chick. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I remember these dipshits in high school, a few years older than my friends and I, who were constantly going out of their way to slam Motley Crue in our presence. You know who I'm talking about, those ridiculous fuckers who were already picking on you anyway, but would now slam into you in the hallways at school and mock, saying, "She got looks, kill," and smirk like you'd committed some crime against the fucking Rolling Stones, who they, of course, happen to love. I mean, these guys were just such dicks for no reason at all. But hey, I guess I get it. I understand why Stones fans are always so insecure. The one thing they didn't copy from the Beatles. Track 4, Bastard. Five stars. From Wikipedia, the song Bastard was targeted by Tipper Gore and the PMRC, who were behind the move to have warning labels placed on albums with lyrics or other content they found disturbing. According to Mick Mars, the song wasn't a call to violence, but rather was about, quote, "a certain person that we used to work with that we felt we were stabbed in the back by," end quote. Unrelenting. That's really it, isn't it? The album is just unrelenting. I don't know how many of you will remember 1983 clearly enough to understand this, but in 1983, we didn't get a lot of songs that had actual cuss words in them. It happened once in a blue moon, but not all that often, and clearly not as the song's title. So as soon as we saw something like this listed as a song title, let me tell you, PMRC, we were gonna buy that fucking album. This song was about just wanting to tear someone apart. But then it also had the word fuck in it, which was like, what? Unfortunately, you sure wouldn't be hearing this song on any of the albums that followed by Motley Crue. Nothing quite this mean and violent again. It sure made an impact on Shout, though, didn't it? Track 5, God Bless the Children of the Beast. The Mick Mars instrumental. I gave it 4 stars. Again, this is the acoustic ditty on the album, like Mick Mars' version of D, without even being acoustic. More of a quietly distorted guitar piece with those harmony lead lines and the single vocal line that immediately takes away any impression that it's something soft and tender by referring to the beast. Track 6, Beatles cover Helter Skelter.
When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide. I get to the top, well, I go right. I get to the bottom and feel again. Well, feel again.
4 stars again. Now, legend has it, and from interviews with him, I completely buy it. Paul McCartney essentially wrote this song for the White Album just to show up The Who, because The Who had claimed that some song they had done was the heaviest song ever, and nothing heavier would ever be recorded. And Paul thought, really? And wrote Helter Skelter. Now, if you've never heard the Beatles version of Helter Skelter, pause this video, open a new tab, and go to YouTube immediately and search for Helter Skelter by the Beatles. Then come back here and we'll talk. Okay, you back? All right. Wow, huh? That was Paul McCartney. So much for the granny music complaint Lennon always made about Paul. Nikki Sixx was not a Beatles fan, referring to the band as fucking wimpy, but he lists Helter Skelter and the White Album among his favorite songs and albums of all time. Now, this Wikipedia remark aside, Sixx was indeed a Beatles fan. He just probably wasn't quite prepared to blurt that out yet in 1983, when he was trying to convince metal fans that they wanted to listen to Motley Crue because this was one of the heaviest albums ever recorded at that point. By the time we got to 89 with Motley Crue, Time for Change would certainly beg to differ with the idea that Sixx was not a Paul McCartney or Beatles fan, right? That's a Paul McCartney song, essentially. But Nikki, even 13-year-old me wanted to tell you, hey man, there ain't nothing wrong with covering the song Paul McCartney wrote purely to show everyone what heavy could be. It worked for them in 68. It works for you in 83. Track 7, first track on side 2, Red Hot.
Well, all right.
big, fat, juicy Motley Crue stars. Oh my God, I love this song. I'm not sure this was always the highlight from Shout for me, but it sure has been for the last 30 years or so. The whole album is fucking awesome. This is super fucking awesome. When I saw them in Kansas City in 1987 and they went into this song, I was yep. Track 8, Too Young to Fall in Love.
You say our love is like dynamite. Open your eyes.
5 stars. This third single from the album and the first favorite song I had on it. What a riff. What a vocal. Written entirely by Nikki Sixx. This should tell you what the guy is capable of right away. What a great song. Jeez. A little on the commercial side for this album, and still perfectly brutal and pissed off. Wowza. This was the first Motley Crue video I ever got to see. I was at my aunt and uncle's house watching MTV with my cousin. She was a huge Motley fan too. And I just remember us sitting there when this video finally came on and basically celebrating. What's wrong with that rice, I wonder? Track 9, Knock 'em Dead Kid. 5 stars. The quote about this song on Wikipedia is, Knock 'em Dead Kid was inspired by a violent encounter between Sixx and a group of Hell's Angels. Sixx somehow wound up in a fight with a group of bikers, even hitting one member in the face with a chain he had been wearing as a belt. The Hell's Angels turned out to be undercover cops, and the bassist was subsequently badly beaten and jailed, resulting in a black eye and broken cheekbone. After being released from jail, Sixx was inspired to write a song about the ordeal. Okay, I'm not sure how much I buy that story, but it's the legend, and legend is important, people. So I'm going to let it go at that. Besides, even if it's not true, it's way more fun when you just go ahead and buy in. So let's all just agree to do that, shall we? I remember reading about that fight with the cops in several different interviews in Hit Parader and Circus and all of that back in 83 and 84, and people even brought it up in interviews well after that. This is a great song, incredible riff, great vocal. I love how Vince mostly seems to be maintaining a controlled scream on this album. He would never quite do that again. Tom Werman has said that it wasn't easy to get a keeper vocal track from Vince on this album because Vince was always out partying the night before. Okay, then, Tom must have earned his pay because Vince's vocals are spectacular on this album. And as long as I'm giving each guy glowing individual marks for their performance on Shout at the Devil, we might as well talk about the rhythm section too, right? Is there really any better drummer in 1983 than Tommy Lee? Okay, yes, Neil Peart, of course, but that doesn't even really count, does it? That's like the answer that's so obvious it goes without mention, right? Like, who's the best superhero? Superman or the Field? Well, it's not going to be the Field, right? Yeah. Anyway, track 10, 10 Seconds to Love. Another 5 stars. I would love to know exactly how the writing was split on this track. It says 6, Neil, but was that just lyrics? I wonder. Vince does play guitar a little bit after all. But if it was just lyrics, which lyrics did Vince write, I wonder? Something I'll probably never know, but I've always wondered about. I know one of the most commonly held beliefs in the hard rock metal world in the 80s was that Nikki Sixx could write a mean song, but was a terrible bass player. But I beg to differ, my friends. Nikki's bass playing on Shout the Devil is fantastic. Why? Because he just serves the song, which is exactly what a bassist should be focused on, at least in my book. And I began playing bass because Nikki's playing inspired me to. There are great examples all over this album. Danger, Red Hot, Bastard. It's all perfect. These are the kind of bass lines you young bassists should be shooting for. Complement the song. Learn how to make the drums and guitar sound better with what you are doing. That's your job. You are the offensive lineman of the band, fuckers. Own that shit. It's a beautiful thing. Track 11, Danger.
Streets, here we own and look back. So it took
5 stars. Amazing vocal. Holy crap. They didn't have no real vocal enhancements in 1983, boys and girls. This is all Vince. And it's as good as any vocal you're going to hear from that time. But geez, the song, wow. What an incredible way to finish up the album. You think, oh, okay, now they're going mellow to close things out. But it winds up being one of the most intense things on the entire album. And I'm sure there are people out there who don't get it and don't like it as much as the other stuff. And, well, we just can't be friends. Okay, so That's a grand total of 48 stars for the tracks, divided by 10 tracks, which equals a near perfect 4.8 stars for the album. And honestly, I could have easily gone 5 stars on either or both of the tracks I gave 4 stars to here. It is basically a perfect album for me. And I know for a lot of you folks out there too, probably. But I want to pay more attention to the bottom line on this one, folks. And I'm not sure how else to do that except to just do it. All that stuff I talked about at the beginning, about how I was introduced to this album and this band by my friend Eric, and how it meant all those things to us at that time, about the angst and the rage and the rebellion and independence, and the things I've mentioned in my other Motley Crue videos about how these guys helped me and my classmates through some of the roughest times we'd ever experienced in our lives. In April of 1986, my friend Eric and another friend, Craig, died in a car accident. So suddenly, for me and my friends, my other friends, all these songs about Frankie and Danger and Merry-Go-Round all meant so much more to all of us, because these guys were our connection to that kind of experience. The kind of experience we never knew we were actually going to have, but we wound up having. And now, having introduced most of us to that aspect of life in our young lives, they'd also become our way of understanding and expressing that sense of loss. I'll never forget the day of Eric and Craig's funeral. A bunch of my closest friends all gathering in my bedroom at my parents' house and listening to songs like On With the Show, Merry-Go-Round, Danger, and especially Home Sweet Home, and just sharing that moment together before we had to go to the church with all the ties and button-up shirts and combed hair and families. There we were in my room, just cranking the fuck out of Motley Crue and the songs that had meant the most to us and those two friends we lost together before they meant the most to us apart. I don't think any of us has ever forgotten what that sharing meant to us. It's exactly the sort of thing that makes a band and a song and a moment in time iconic. We'd all gotten to that moment in time in one way or another because of that initial moment in that car with that cassette back in 1983. Shout at the Devil shaped us from 1983 forward, whether we knew it or not at the time. Motley Crue shaped my life. I was 13 then. I'm 52 now. And in that way, nothing has changed. So how on earth does Too Fast for Love come in above Shout at the Devil on this list? You're going to have to tune in next time to find out, hard rockers. Out.